see it.
Hi, everybody. Rebecca Nelson, Becker Vineyards Wine Club Director, here with you once again to get you started on another fantastic virtual tasting with us tonight. Tonight, we're starting a series of library wines that are all from the year 2012. And tonight, we're doing the 2012 Barbera-Merlot blend, which is one of the first of the La Quattro Stagioni series that I was able to try, and it's definitely one of my favorites. I really hope everybody's enjoying this. We have some fabulous guests on with us tonight, of course. We have our winemaker, John Leahy. We also have our assistant winemaker and enologist, Rachel Fanning. And then as a special surprise tonight, we have Carolyn and Joe Callan, and Carolyn is Dr. Richard Becker's sister. So we've got them on with us tonight, coming in from North Texas, and everybody's got their wines open. I hope you guys are swirling. Enjoy, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Rachel, it's good to see you again. And Joe, Carolyn, welcome to the show. Yeah. Are you guys ready to bedazzle us with absolute wonderful adjectives on this wine?
Absolutely.
Well, in keeping with tradition, Carolyn, as a member of the Becker clan, would you lead off a couple of words to start this broadcast?
Well, I just, our hearts just go out to all the people who are working so hard to take this virus out, and we are hoping for a quick end and for strength for those who are having to endure it at this point. So,
well said. Absolutely well said. Well, here's to giving everybody a break for the day and a little bit of lightheartedness and a good glass of wine, hopefully. So if you're joining us, welcome to the broadcast. I'm starting to see some familiar faces on Facebook as it goes. So we're going to dive right into this. And I want everybody to lift their glass, give it a swirl, a sniff, and a taste. So I decanted this wine about an hour ago. Probably could have done an hour and a half, but it's just now starting to open up for me. And Rachel, since you haven't been on and your devout followers have been screaming for days about where was Rachel, since you joined us in 2013, right when we started to bottle this. So why don't you lead us off with your impressions of the wine, and then we're going to get both Carolyn and Joe to give us their impressions separately.
Absolutely. So first I have to say, this has always been one of my favorite wines that we've bottled. And you guys had bottled it just right before I got here, at least half of it, bottled half of it right before I got here. So I didn't get to give you a whole lot of hell about what we're going to do with this one. I feel like I've made up for it in the past 7 years. But isn't this lovely? I mean, in 2012, so here we are 8 years later. It's got, I think it's showing its age so beautifully. I get great black cherries. I think it has such a nice, like a sour cherry nose on it with good fruit. I think it's lovely.
It is a very lovely wine. So Carolyn, let's lead off with you. What are your impressions of the wine?
well, I think Rachel hit it right off when she said cherries, because that's what I got. That's what I get in the color, dark cherries. And when first on the palate, you get, it's a slow moving up, and on the finish, I'm going to have to say cherry turnovers. The Becker, this was something that our mother made and I've made, and they're just amazing little hand pies made with sour cherries, and that smooth kind of pastry, kind of coating, a little warmth on the finish.
Okay, Carolyn, next time you show up in Fredericksburg, there better be some cherry turnovers, lady.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what are your impressions of the wine?
Well, I agree with Carolyn, and I'll just say at the outset, I wasn't blessed with what we call in the family the Becker palate. My palate's a lot more pedestrian, but and so I've learned to accept on faith what Carolyn says. But I do agree. I guess my biggest surprise with the wine was the amount of fruit still there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it's held its fruit pretty well. I'm getting a little bit of just a touch of celery in here, which is indicative to Merlots as they age. Both Merlots and Cabernets have older ones start to have that little bit of herbaceousness that, for me, comes across as celery. But it just the hint on there, and then that fruit starts rolling out. What I'm really liking is on the meniscus, and I doubt I'm going to be able to do this justice without spilling wine all over my computer, but it's just starting to go brown a little bit on there.
Yeah.
So this particular bottle, so it's definitely aging. Decanting, like I said, an hour before, which was really, really nice on there.
Yeah.
So Rachel, we're gonna run into a few problems here. We could just stick to what the label says, 50-50, or we could let people know that there was 1% Viognier added to there too. Which one do you think we should do?
I think they need to know the truth.
Okay, so the truth is, you can't handle the truth. Okay, I promise I'll be good. So we did actually end up putting a little bit of Viognier in here, and I think it really, in the red wines, Viognier, when you co-ferment, actually helps with color stability. When you blend it in young, it helps with tannin management. It cannot be a lot of white wine, but just a touch. And we went through a few permutations on this, and I looked up, I had to go back and look up my notes, and thankfully, Rachel, you are extraordinarily organized and have everything in a nice format on there. But I went back to the blending notes when I first started making this. So we used the Barbera-Merlot. The Merlot came from two sources. It came from the Ballinger, our old Ballinger vineyard, and the Reddy vineyards. And I think I alluded to that with Akil last week. We told him that a little bit was in there. And then, of course, our Mason vineyards where the Barbera came from, the old Peters Prairie vineyard up in Mason, between Mason and Camp Air.
John,
Yes.
I would like for you to tell everybody the story about you deciding to blend a Barbera and a Merlot together. How many times were you asked, have you bought your house yet?
I know, right? And Doc was just he was being jokeful. He knew exactly what. I'm going to tilt my camera back up and let everybody see this map of Italy, because this comes into play. All right. So you'll notice this little section up here, Barbera d'Alba, and then Dolcetto area right up here in the Piemonte, right on the border with France up there, where some rogue people a couple centuries ago started blending Barbera and Merlot together. So I could not convince anyone that this was a real thing. I'm like, yes, you can blend Merlot with Barbera. It works very well. But when we first did it, everybody looked at me. They're like, come up with a good blended wine. Whoops, I'm hitting my decanter. I don't know how much I can drink. Anyway, I know, right? We came up with a couple of blends to fire up for the wine club. And I came up with the Barbera-Merlot, and you'd acted like I said, well, let's put apple juice in it. I mean, it was just foreign to everybody. And until Doc's like, yeah, so I've had Barbera-Merlots before. And I'm like, well, why are you giving me hell for it?
So much more fun.
Yeah, apparently it was much more fun. But it's a great blend. It's not common, but you can find them out there. And I think the two of them go together very, very well. So it's kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Another striking feature of this
Yes.
wine is the alcohol content. It may be the highest alcohol content of any Becker wine that
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Rachel, do you get heat off of this when you taste it?
Are my cheeks already red?
Yeah, they are starting to flush a little bit. But I want people to taste this wine, and if you haven't looked at the alcohol, if you're not familiar with it, you taste this wine, and you cannot taste heat initially.
Yeah.
It's 15.5% alcohol by volume. 2012 was an extraordinarily ripe year. I did get a question just a second ago on how much Barbera is grown in Texas, if any. Well, the answer is yes, we grow Barbera in Texas. As a matter of fact, the Barbera for this came from a little tiny place called Mason County. It's just a few miles northwest of us. So I am not sure. Rachel, do you know how much Barbera is grown in the state? Because I know there are a few people who grow it.
Yeah. So we actually had two sources at the time. We could get it off of our Peters Prairie out of Mason, and we also still get Barbera from Drew Talent, also in Mason, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
And I know there are a couple people up in the High Plains growing it. We don't personally purchase any Barbera from the High Plains, but I know it's up there. So there's a fair amount as far as that goes. So Joe, back to your comment about the alcohol. What So what was your thoughts, your initial thoughts when you tasted it versus when you looked at the label?
Well, actually my reaction was the same as yours or Rachel's. I didn't taste the heat, or I didn't get the usual clues that the alcohol content was that high.
Mhm.
So I was surprised when I saw it on the label. And
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because yeast normally don't go that high. There are a few strains of yeast out there that will do a complete fermentation. A lot of the strains that we use are not very efficient consumers of their carbohydrates. They go into a feeding frenzy mode. It's
Mhm.
kind of like if you're really, really hungry after a night of partying and you start eating and chips go half over the couch and the other half in your stomach. That's pretty much what the yeast are doing with the sugars. So some of them are not as efficient as others. We do have a few wild strains that will go up to 15%. Some of the cultivated strains will go up as high as 18%. There have been yeast that have made it up a little bit higher, but anything past that is pretty hard. So 15.5% is about 16% is about the maximum that most of the yeast we use will do before they hit their dormancy.
John, I've got a question. If you had not added Merlot, would this be a lighter color wine similar to Dolcetto?
Not quite. The Barbera, well, Rachel, Rachel's a Barbera fan. So we did, yeah, we did do it. But what do you think of the color right now, Rachel, the current Barberas? Because I think it's darker than the Dolcetto by a few shades.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so that's one of the things that, to tie this into how it actually, I feel like it grows in the hill country. So it's tiny little berries, and they're super, super dark berries. This very concentrated flavor, very concentrated colors, and it ripens so quickly down here with our heat that we actually struggle to get it off of the vineyard at anything less than 27, 28 bricks. It just flows so quickly. What is nice about it is that it retains all of its acidity on its own. So it's not unheard of at all for us to bring this in at 27, 28 bricks and the pH still be right around 3.4, 3.5, which is really low for Texas.
Yes,
Very low.
very low and very phenomenal. And that's what makes Barbera such a nice, not on just on its own, but also a nice blender to balance that acid. And some of these other things like this Merlot did not come in at 3.5, 3.6. If I remember correctly, we had Merlots coming in at 4.1, 4.2 off of the pick that year. So a very high pH. So having that balance is really nice. So I'm getting a couple of questions here. One of them was, can Harold take that high of an alcohol? Joe, Carolyn, I don't know if you've watched the broadcast before, but every once in a while I mention a friend of mine named Harold. And Harold is a yeast.
And he's in your freezer. He's at the back.
Yes. Okay. So you have watched.
No casual,
No, we watch them all.
freezer diving is going to turn him up.
Do not do what I did and mix Harold with Scotch. It never goes. So the answer is yes, Harold can, and yes, Harold made a debut with this wine. Harold was in the Barbera. So the anyway, yes, that's Harold's a very efficient eater. So I've got to dive back into this and want to turn it over to Rachel for a minute or two to talk about the Talent Vineyard in particular, Rachel, and the Barbera there. What are your impressions of the Barbera now that you've been making that wine for a few vintages? Give us your impressions of that particular varietal.
I feel like I'm going to be really redundant and say I love it. I absolutely love it. Like, I think it's
Look, you cannot use the Brett short answer on it's got to be brisket, or I mean, right? No, but,
no, it's such a beautiful grape, and I mean, Drew, I think okay, stuttering because I'm so excited to talk about it. Drew's fruit is absolutely beautiful, and the Barbera that comes off of his vineyard is just, I mean, hands down amazing. Off the top of my head, I know that we've used quite a bit of the 2018 in blends this year, but I don't remember what they are now. You can probably help with that. But I did want to ask if you remember on the Peters Prairie Vineyard, all of that Barbera, is that what's head trained?
yes.
Behind the house, right? It's all head trained. Yeah.
It's head pruned, yeah. And that, it was funny because in 2012 we also got Nebbiolo and Albarino off of that vineyard in that area. So the Nebbiolo, another Italian varietal, and Albarino, of course, I call it an Iberian varietal because it's but Portuguese to me, though it is grown in Spain as well. But the Peter's Prairie to me was the beautiful palette for creation, because we had like 500 different varietals, it seemed like. I mean, there were a good 10, 11 varietals that we grew up there in small amounts. And so they, and then of course, coupled that with the wines that we're getting off of Ballinger at the time. So we got quite a few smaller varietals that most people don't get to deal with. And it was a lot of fun. And that's in the end what this wine was. It was just a fun wine to make, and a Barbera-Merlot. And I keep going back to it while you guys are talking, because the nose is fascinating to me. And I think everybody needs to give it another swirl and sniff, because I'm getting some really deep cellar edges coming off here, some deeper earthy notes, maybe a little bit of mushroom-like umami in the nose. I hate to, God, I'm gonna sound like a Californian. Oh, this is great.
Definitely leather.
Mhm. Yep.
What
So-
about tannins in this wine?
I'm
John?
sorry?
What about tannins in this wine? They seem to be very low. Is that what we would expect?
Actually, no, they're not. You know, first of all, Merlot has a boatload of tannins. Barbera does too. The problem with the tannins in Barbera, it's usually so acidic in there, you get that tartness from the fruit, and your mouth completely forgets about the dryness on there. But that these two wines together, that's why they age so well, and that's why you find some really good vintage Merlots and Barberas from different producers around the world, because they certainly have a predisposition to age. The tannins are in here. So I'm gonna go back on a soapbox, which unfortunately Rachel has to listen to so many times every week, week in, week out, month by month, year by year. She's probably ready to just weld my door shut in my office.
I don't even know which one you're talking about yet.
Yeah, oh, the balance one, about wine and balance. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, it's something you try to do, and it's something that gets done by accident. You know, you try to make a well-balanced wine, and when it comes out that way, you're like, what the hell did I do? How did that happen? You know, but the idea behind this, when a wine is in good balance, Carolyn, you will not happen on one particular aspect. You won't notice the tannin immediately. You won't notice the alcohol immediately. You won't notice the acid immediately. You're going to hit it all together at once in the palate from front to back. And that's why when I blend, my personal grading point on wine, when I'm tasting the components of a potential blend, I grade them 1 through 6. And to me, 1 and 2 are the front of the palate, 3 and 4 are mid palate, and 5 and 6 are the follow through in the back of the palate. Then I grade on nose. So I always start with a sniff and then a taste, and then I go back to smelling. I don't need to taste wine constantly. I taste it once or twice, sometimes 3 times. But you know, once I taste it, then I just need to go back to the nose to remember. So that 1 through 6 for me, a good, complete, well-balanced blend will be 1 through 6 all the way through. Different components have different areas they hit you. Some Merlots hit me 3, 4, 5, not on the front of the mouth. I get very little fruit, and then suddenly this powerhouse of body. Where Dolcetto sometimes hits me 1 through 3 or 1 through 4, a lot of fruit, but very, very little follow through. Barbera has, it clips most of the time right at 5, because the acid, it's there. As it ages, it can extend, but that Merlot added that end to the Barbera, that Barbera added the acid, so we could become a balanced blend. So there's the geekiness for it. So are your eyes glazed over yet, Rachel?
No, that was beautiful. I think we all went, oh.
Yes, so
Carolyn, I keep going back to what you were saying at the beginning, that it has such beautiful fruit. It's the nice acidity in the front. It just flows.
Mhm.
And then it takes a minute that at the back, that's where I start getting that dryness, that gritty sensation from the tannins, that they're not super, or at least I'm not really cognizant of them up front. It's
Right.
as it finishes that I'm more aware
Oh
of.
yeah, they do. They absolutely do. Okay, guys out there in wonderful Facebook land, you guys have to start typing some questions. And yes, Trish, I'll give you a little bit of Harold if you type me another question. That's your price. And then
I have a question.
yes, sir.
I'm a big lover of the Becker Cab Syrah, and,
Mhm.
and that's available in grocery stores here
Mhm.
in Dallas, as you know. I'm now, this is the first bottle of this wine we've had, and I would say my allegiance is shifting to this, to the Merlot
Right.
Barbera blend. So how much production do you have? How much do you project going forward?
Well, as far as Barbera-Merlot, we made it this time, but we have not had a follow through on
No.
another vintage yet.
We have asked.
What?
We have asked.
Yeah.
One of
So,
us has asked repeatedly.
well, but they're okay. But I am not getting hell for making another Barbera-Merlot. Do you hear me, Dr. Becker? Yeah, right. Doc's trying to dial in right now. Yeah. So,
I don't want to get in the crossfire, so.
oh no, it's more fun in the crossfire. So, yeah, we probably will when time allows. Some of these wines we're only going to make when the conditions are right. It's like our Cab Franc. We don't have one every single vintage, or our Petit Syrah, but the Barbera-Merlot was very good. I also think to use this week to show the 2012s to everyone shows what a wine does when it starts to get close to that vintage age. To me, vintage age is about 10 years. So this is approaching that. And I have, unfortunately, a great lover of vintage wines. The older the wine is, if you did not buy it young, the more expensive it becomes, and the more like a drug addict you feel when you're starting to lay out some serious clams for that bottle of wine. So this, sending it out to people, also shows, I hope, it showcases the fact that when you do age a wine, what it is that people rant and rave about. This wine's going to go with food, and that's going to be our segue into it. Somebody just asked, how do you decide how much of each vintage and type you're going to produce? Right? You want to tackle that one, Rachel?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Because John locks himself in the office and goes, "Oh crap!"
And I'm looking and go, do you know how much of this you made? Do you know?
Yeah, right. I was like, I think we need 13,000 gallons of that. And then it's like, why? I'm like, because we sold 12,999 of them. But, how much beyond the next 2 years would you hold on to this 2012? That's a great question, Angela. Thank you for asking that. So I'm going to get your opinions, and I'll give my opinion. And Angela, this is strictly opinion. This is not dyed-in-the-wool fact. So you're going to have to decide on your own by tasting each year. So Rachel, how long would you hold this?
I think, given how well this is holding up now at 8 years old, 10 years, probably not going to be a problem at all. I bet we could push the 15-year limit on it.
Okay.
That's not a limit. There's no limit on there.
Carolyn, Joe, and we're going to put Joe on the hot seat here in a minute, but we'll let you defer one more time to somebody else's opinion, Joe, and then we're going to demand it from you. What do you guys think? Carolyn, how long would you hold?
It's so incredible now. I can't imagine it having a rapid decline. I mean, we decanted fairly early, and so just the way the color changed and the flavors developed.
Right. I've been doing it in two glasses all the way along. I have my Somm glass or Syrah glass. It's a general glass. If I'm not sure about the wine, I'll put it in here. And then I have the traditional Bordeaux glass, which it's fine. I get more earthiness out of here, but out of the Somm glass, I'm getting that fruit really forward. So the glass does, in this case, make a difference. So Angela, I would say for me personally, I'm liking the way it's tasting now. I'll taste this again in another 6 to 8 months, probably this fall. And then I have a few bottles stashed. So I would say it'll hit the 15-year mark without a problem either. If it's properly stored and it doesn't have a lot of heat fluctuation during the year, it can be calm, cool, and in the dark, you're probably good for another 5 to 8 years without a problem. So that all depends too. The best thing about trying to collect wine for vintage wine is trying those wines every year. And then right when it hits the peak, you realize, crap, I only have 2 bottles left.
Yeah.
But you don't know that you hit the peak until you pass the peak.
Right. I don't know if this, we just got a question about purchasing more of this. I have no idea. I think this was just released for library selection. I don't think we have a lot to purchase, and I'm not sure about non-wine club members, wine club members. I don't know if anybody, I think we were just releasing it for this for fun.
We've been drinking Becker wines as you would expect
From
since
day one.
from day one, and this is the first time we've had this. So, yeah, I did not know it existed actually.
Well, it's one of several treasures we have hidden down in that basement.
Yeah.
And if Rebecca's listening, we are not going to talk about the 2012 Cab Franc and that there are only 6 bottles left.
Oh,
She'll
definitely one of our very favorites.
Okay. Before I get into barrels and stuff, let's go food. So, Carolyn, we're going to start with you, and then Joe, you have to come up with something different.
Okay, I mean, I'm thinking a piccata chicken. I think you need something with some browning, but not the depth of beef. I mean, I want some garlic, maybe some mushrooms, maybe some capers going on.
Sure.
And for dessert, cherry turnovers.
Cherry turnovers. You're making me my mouth water thinking about those cherry turnovers. That's torture.
Or strawberry shortcake. Think how good that would be.
No, you mentioned cherry turnovers.
Yeah.
Not only you just teased a fat man with dessert.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Joe, what food?
I was going to say that, Richard makes, with your help, makes wonderful wine, but Carolyn's a wonderful cook. So I benefit both ways from the Becker palate. But she convinced me, we discussed this obviously before we came on, and so she convinced me roasted meat is the way to go. And my favorite roasted meat would be probably pork loin.
Pork loin?
Yeah.
Ooh, that would be good. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. This anyway, I'll get to it in a second. Rachel, what do you think?
All right, I have 2, and I'm so excited, Carolyn, that you said the cherry popovers, because I actually made a list earlier so that I don't forget. But I have lamb, because I think this would go wonderfully with lamb, especially with the mushrooms.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. A blue cheese for your cheese, and I wrote either a blue or a blackberry cobbler.
Oh, yeah.
Nice
From the
dark
same-
fruit.
Yeah.
So, Carolyn, before I get to my food choice, you're going to have to give us a recipe for these cherry turnovers because people are screaming about it on Facebook. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'll just say the problem is finding good cherries. And what
Right.
you want to do is go online to growers in Door County, Wisconsin.
Okay.
They've got fantastic cherries and they ship. And you can get them either unsweetened, these are sour cherries, unsweetened or
Ooh,
bitter. So,
somebody just
Awesome.
mentioned your pork loin with cherry sauce
oh.
and make a little wine in the cherry sauce. That would be excellent.
Really good.
Wow.
Okay, but Carolyn, you mentioned Door County, Wisconsin. Now we got to pay homage to the folks in Utah who grow cherries, in Idaho and Washington and Oregon.
It's just that I've been able to order. I mean, I order order cases of cherries, and we have friends who go up there and bring back cases, and
Nice.
it's amazing.
Perfect. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to go with a pretty non-traditional dish here, but a really nice slow roasted mushroom soup.
Oh,
So, I think the mushroom soup would do so well here. The onion soup would be fine, but I really, really love. So we make a mushroom broth to use in other things. We use that as the basis and a few different types of mushrooms. Not a cream soup. So a nice savory soup, I think would do very, very well with this. So, okay. So everybody's screaming now, wine in the sauce, even better. So, somebody just mentioned brie. We're enjoying this with more wine and brie. That's absolutely, absolutely perfect. So Rachel, I guess we have to kind of make this up. I actually went back through, and I hate to say this, I don't think that I used any brand new French oak on any of this wine in 2012. I think I know that the Barbera, my barrel budget was nothing back then. So
It may be nothing soon.
you should convince everybody to say right now, oh, it'd be much better with newer oak, right?
All right. So that being said, I actually think that the Barbera benefits so well from neutral oak.
Yes.
Like I don't think that it needs the new oak. It has
I
such
agree.
great flavor and intensity that it doesn't need anything to try to outshine it.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. So we did use almost all neutral oak on this. It had a little bit of new American oak on the Merlot portion, and just so people are aware, but the entire blend, according to my notes, was less than 15% new oak. So those notes were written in a hurry. So apparently I was probably half guessing when I wrote the notes. So we've got to get to a couple of other things here for everybody at home. We would love a few more questions. That'd be great. Don't forget to share this with people. If you've enjoyed the broadcast, share it on your Facebook. Let other people know how great Texas wines are. And if you've enjoyed this, I think you're going to really, really enjoy joining us on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, with our 2012 Estate Merlot. This particular beauty was aged for 3 years in barrel before we bottled it, and then aged in a bottle another year before we released it. And then we hid it. So we sent it out to you guys. Also, next week, I believe, let me see if I can find them on the notes here that Brett was so kind to give to me. Next week's tasting, if you want to order for this week for next week's, we're going to do the 2017 Reserve Viognier, and then we're going to do the new 2018 Culinaria, and then follow that up with the 2015 Culinaria as a library release. So next week, it's going to be fun. The Viognier is awesome. If you've not had the 17 Reserve Viognier, I think it's one of our better Viogniers. And comparing those two Culinarias will be fun, because every year I get to decide what goes in the Culinaria. There's no, it has to be based in kind of idea. It's just, okay, whatever you put out there, pal, type of thing. So it'll be fun to compare the two. And we just bottled, and you guys will be the first ones to taste the 2018. For those of you who will order for next week, you'll be brand spanking new, the first people to get it. So it'll be fun to go through it. Any other, people are going, Culinarias. Awesome. And yes, there have been a few questions about the winery. Yes, both the winery and downtown location, we are not open for visitors, but we are open for curbside pickup. We hope you'll avail yourselves to such. If you find yourself in need of some wine, give us a call. We'll have the order ready for you. You can come by, and there's signs out there. You just text and call, tell us what parking lot you're in. We'll come out and pop the wine out for you. So if you have interest in that, please feel free. Or if you would like to order online, we do maintain any state in the union that we can ship to, we will ship to. So if you're online and want to try some of these wines, we'd be happy to send them to you. Other than that,
I would like to add into that for just one heartbeat of a second, because we were talking about this before we went live, that we are during the summer months shipping in styrofoam to try to mitigate the heat. It's hot, it's Texas, it's summer. So we are packing them with ice packs and in styrofoam. So
and we're telling people you got to do overnight shipping if you're out of state. And
everything arrived in beautiful condition.
Good. Yeah, it's just, we're very, very, very aware of the quality of the wine and when it goes out into the heat and how quick it gets to you. So be prepared for that. If you want to order some wines and delay shipping until the fall, that's perfectly fine. You can call our folks at the wine club. You call our main line, which is 830-644-2681 and extension 230. And there are a couple of folks there that are absolutely fantastic. They're our heart and soul. So Angie, everybody say thank you to Angie. Let's embarrass her for a little bit. So thank you, Angie, for taking care of us when we order our wines. And if you feel free to go ahead and give us a call. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it for tonight's broadcast. So I just want to tell everybody at home, thanks for joining us once again. And I wish everybody good health and great wine and a good, happy rest of the week. So cheers.
Cheers.